Australia. That cursed sandbox that defies logic, sanity, and gravity. You may know it for such things as teddy bears with chlamydia, spiders, more spiders, Uluru, Neil of Seal fame, weird horse things that hop and have bigger arms than you, and Aboriginals. Now, alongside this mesmerising and alien ecosystem, Australia has something that really boggles the mind. Humans. Indeed, Australians, as they are known as, are quite the enigmatic creatures, being hardy enough to deal with the hostile environment down under, but not quite tough enough to do it sober. They are still kind of Anglos, after all. The thing is with Anglos, though, is that they have a venerable and increasingly scrutinised democratic streak. So, of course, that means that these Australians have something similar to normal white people, with parliaments, elections, and prime ministers all partaking in the grand LARP called democracy. Today's story is about one such prime minister. Now, before I get started, yes, I understand that the whole "did you know an Australian PM got eaten by a shark" factoid is Reddit slop. But one thing that we're very, very good at on this channel is going on very, very deep dives into minor subjects that a lot of people might know about, but digging up a lot of whole new things about it that a lot of people might not know about. And it turns out that this Today I Learned tier fact actually has a much, much deeper rabbit hole than you might think. The curious case of Harold Holt. Please leave a like and a comment on this video because it really helps me in the algorithm. Do you know what the elite establishment is trying to hide from all of us? The truth about your body's natural ability to heal itself. I just discovered something wild about stem cells. They're like tiny repair crews in your body that go and fix things that need to be fixed. Joe Rogan has been talking about this for years. Just watch this.
I had a full-length rotator cuff tear, and the UFC gave me a doctor in Los Angeles, and he looks at my MRI and goes, "You're gonna need surgery." I go, 100%? He goes, "I don't know how you're using it now. It's a matter of time. You're gonna need surgery, so it might be better to do it now." So I got it shot up with stem cells. And this was the early days of stem cells in America where you could get away with more. That you gotta go to Mexico now again.
So, as Rogan pointed out, most stem cell therapies are banned in the United States. Not because they're unsafe, but because they work too well and they threaten big pharma profits. I mean, think about it. If you could heal without pills, insurance, or endless doctor's visits, who loses? The same corrupt system that's been lying to you about politics has been lying to you about your health. The FDA's crackdown forces people overseas paying up to $50,000 for a single injection. But here's what most people don't know. High flavanol cocoa can naturally boost your stem cell activity. Studies show its flavanols trigger stem cells to leave your bone marrow and enter your bloodstream like bees from a hive. It's amazing. A Harvard scientist, Dr. William Lee, actually backs this up. Check it out.
So, studies have been done to show that the flavanols in cocoa stimulate stem cells to come out of your bone marrow like bees in a beehive in your bloodstream, and they go out and they find wherever it needs to be repaired. If it's in your heart, they'll fix it. If it's in your liver, they'll fix it. If it's in your skin, they'll fix it.
So that's right, dark chocolate. Dark chocolate, gang. But here's the thing. Flavanols are the good stuff found in cocoa beans, but they're usually destroyed, unfortunately, during the chocolate making process. But the good news is that Black Forest Supplements has created the first ever high flavanol cocoa powder packed with everything your body actually needs. And it's only 20 calories. I mix it with my coffee every morning. I just had a cup actually, and I absolutely love it. It tastes amazing. This isn't your average cocoa, it's a stem cell power-up. I think you're going to be absolutely blown away. So click the link in the description box down below, and for the next 48 hours only, you can get a whopping buy one, get one completely free Labor Day promo. You heard that right, buy one, get one free. But this promo is just for the next 48 hours, so don't wait and click on that link in the description box down below. So, before we get into the aforementioned curious case, I best ask and answer a rather important question. Who the fuck is Harold Holt? Harold Edward Holt entered this earth in Stanmore, Sydney on the 5th of August 1908. The child of a teacher, Holt attempted to have quite a normal upbringing, or as normal as you can expect from Australia, attending the Central Sydney Intensive English High School. That's a bit of a fucking mouthful. By the time young Harold was 6 years old, he and the rest of his family had moved out to Adelaide, where his father became the licensee for a hotel and Harold himself joined his brother in the Randwick Public School until 1916. Then he was sent to live with his grandparents in, I shit you not, a place called Nubba. Fun fact, once you veer out from the big cities, you will find that the interior of Australia sounds like it was charted and named by George Lucas. Take, for example, the Guga State Forest and Creek, lying at the base of Mount Binga, nestled betwixt the picturesque towns of Kooyar and Blackbutt. Just along the way from Pim Pim Budgie to the west, or just up the A17 north to Tugulawa. Fucking Muppets Down Under tier bullshit names. Now, what the fuck does any of that have to do with Harold? Well, nothing really. But as far as I'm concerned, being sent to a place called fucking Nubba surely had to do something to him psychologically. Now, in Nubba, he attended the Nubba State School before being mercifully dragged back to Sydney just in time for his parents to separate and have him cycle through 2 more boarding schools before getting himself a scholarship at the University of Melbourne, specialising in law and locking in on his cricket and football grind set, alongside perusing and frequenting a wide range of student clubs, societies and other such groups. Naturally, being a busybody paid off for Harold, winning himself prizes for essay writing and other such nerd shit. Of course, this essayism paired with his law studies and a notable inclusion in the local debate club were giving him all of the ingredients for a potential statesman in the making. Or a really annoying reply guy. Either way, come 1930, he waltzed out of university with a Bachelor of Laws degree. He was a lawyer now. Skipping over some fluff, he went on to start up his own law firm in 1933, just in time to deal with clients during the whimsical period of history known as the Great Depression, which, wouldn't you know it, made clients a little bit difficult to come by on account of the fact that nobody had a fucking job, and therefore nobody had any money. Very sad. Seeing as he had no clients, he ended up needing to compromise to keep on living. So that meant he shacked up in a boarding house for a while and eventually landed himself a gig with the Victorian Cinematograph Exhibitors Association, a film industry lobbying group, which he got through good old-fashioned nepotism. But unlike most familial blow-ins, at least Harold had some skills to actually bring to the table, with him being a lawyer and all that. So he ended up acting as a legal aid for the group and ended up making acquaintances with 2 fellows by the name of Jack Graham and James Newman. These 3 gents would then go on to found the Holt, Graham and Newman legal firm. Very imaginative name. Living amidst the hellscape of Wall Street's cock-up, people naturally got rather curious and clued in on the functions of the state, and became more politically active as a result. Unsurprisingly, this included Harold, who joined the youth wing of the United Australia Party, and in the process he struck up a friendship with a myriad of rather influential people in the contemporary Australian political scene, including multiple daring dames from the Australian Women's National League, and even managing to secure the patronage of one Robert Menzies, who, for the non-Aussies watching, would go on to become a rather important person. Come 1934, Holt was standing for his first ever seat in the 1934 federal election, gunning for the division of Yarra, which was fucking futile due to it being a very safe seat for Australian Labour. So of course, he fucking lost. But that's not really the point. There was always next year. Next year comes and Harold tries a crack at a separate seat this time in the Victorian state election, locking in on Clifton Hall. And wouldn't you know it, he loses yet again. Because guess what? That's another fucking Labour stronghold that he just threw himself at. But what is there to gain from all of this? Well, I'm very glad I made you ask that, because you see, Harold was getting experience. So, when a federal by-election is called in August of 1935, after UAP's George Maxwell dies, Harold is in the running once again for his seat in Fawkner. And this time, he actually managed to win it, beating out both Labour and his fellow UAPers at the young age of 27, becoming the youngest MP in Parliament. Remember Robert Menzies? Well, in April of 1939, he would go on to become the Prime Minister. And if you were a particularly perceptive Paul, you would remember that Menzies considered Holt something of a protege. And as such, Harold was given the position of Minister without portfolio. Despite being essentially relegated to the ministerial spares, he ended up becoming de facto second to Richard Casey, the Minister for Supply and Development. Now, that might sound like a little bit of an inconsequential posting, except for the fact that it is one of the government's defence postings. And it's 1939. Speaking of which, the Second World War. You all know it, you all love LARPing in it. There's no point in me going into the nitty-gritty about the war, because this is not a World War II video. And we also all know what happened. Well, some of us do. But anyway, indeed, upon the war's outbreak, Harold did the patriotic thing and joined the Army Reserves. And later on in May of 1940, he went on to enlist in the 2nd Australian Imperial Force, with the intent of being a regular, being posted to the 2nd and 4th Field Regiment as a gunner. After being offered an officer's commission by the Air Force and refusing it, Harold was then sent to a place unironically called Pukapunyal for training. And he was due to be deployed when his career was prematurely terminated by the Canberra air disaster, which was a plane crash that killed 3 cabinet members and the chief of the General Staff, forcing a snap election to be called and plucking Harold right before the fight, Jarhead style. After a hung parliament, Harold was sworn in as Minister for Labour and National Service, and became head of a newly founded department of the same name. Indeed, the volunteer was voluntold to volunteer the involuntary. A cosmic monkey paw curl if I've ever seen one. Alongside this, he was assigned a role within the Advisory War Council, and he even ended up being given the position of Minister in charge of scientific and industrial research. All of this is to say that he was pretty fucking important for the Australian wartime apparatus. Not too shabby for a ninny from Nubba. Skipping over a bunch of other shit because I don't really care, come February of 1945, Harold Holt jumped ship from the rotting corpse of the UAP and he joined the newly founded Liberal Party. Because, as it turned out, when the UAP became the opposition in Parliament, they got fucking bodied. So they functionally rebranded into the Liberals. Being reshuffled to the newly created seat in Higgins, Holt proceeded to win re-election, and was assigned the position of Minister for Labour and National Service, and the Minister for Immigration, which at the time was quite the contentious topic for a few reasons that I can't really be bothered going into the nitty-gritty of. All you need to know is that it was called the White Australia policy for a reason. And Holt, unlike his predecessor, Arthur Calwell, was quite the progressive. I'm not commenting on that any further. All of this is to say that Holt was doing rather fucking well in government, managing to overall keep his head down and grind out his duties alongside being a de facto peacemaker for the several branches of the state, making sure everybody was a good boy and getting along without any interruptions. This busybodying culminated in him getting appointed as a Privy Councillor, then Leader of the House. Then, in December of 1958, he got to succeed previous PM Arthur Fadden as the Treasurer. This was despite the fact that Holt, like everybody else who's actually fucking honest, has no fucking idea whatsoever how economics or finance works. But he accepted it anyway because that is a pretty influential position and it actually gave him a pretty good shot at the PM seat in due time. And after inheriting a growing economy and deciding that that's for pansies and instigating a rather harsh credit crunch which was nicknamed the Holt Jolt, he had set things right by putting the country into a recession which resulted in the Australian unemployment rate climbing to an eye-watering 3%. Yeah, remember when 3% was seen as extremely bad? Simpler times. The thing is, though, old Robert Menzies was starting to get on in age, and the country needed someone younger and, at a minimum, just as competent as him. And the best that they could do was Harold Holt. That's right, after being a fucking penis with the Treasury, he ended up becoming PM. All it took was time and a redemption filler arc that I can't be bothered going into. After all, we've got mysteries to solve. So, how was he as PM? Well, here's some of his highlights. He moved away from the sterling area and created the Americanized abomination known as the Australian dollar, to just be hip and trendy and have a decimalized currency, and in the process following Canada, New Zealand and a bunch of ambient background NPC countries and having some of the most boring currencies known to man, beholden only to the Eurozone and the Peso's Reich. I'm not even really mad about leaving the sterling area. It's just that it's needlessly dull and uninspired. Do you know how much more fun and easy it would have been to just have a uniquely named currency that's not just an ethnic dollar? Like, you could have been funny and named it some piss-take abo shite like Klinkabongs, Razoos, or even fucking Dollary-Doos. Like, even South Africa has gotten you beat with the Randy Rand. I'm just saying, for a country that names all of its towns fucking Fraggle Rock names, the term Australian dollar is just boring. So, moving on, Harold also did his fair share of wildlife conservation, including, but not limited to, setting up the Office of Aboriginal Affairs, removing Section 127 of the Australian Constitution and altering parts of Section 51, allowing Aboriginals to be legally considered as human, and allowing them to show up and be considered in the census and stuff like that. This was the late 60s, by the way. Utterly rama-rama, if you catch my drift. Harold also went on to announce the National Gallery of Australia, which was a great thing, save for the fact that it wouldn't actually open for another 15 years. Understandable, because look at the fucking state of it. That is utterly gorgeous, mid-wit brutalist chic. Dare I be so bold as to call it Gablogian architecture. Also, because it was the Cold War, Holt was quite the fervent anti-communist, and by extension his administration would be something similar, culminating in doubling down on Australia's commitment in Vietnam, reminding us all that Australia actually does things every once in a while. Good effort, lads. Holt also struck up something of a bromance with presidential filler episode Lyndon Blowjob Johnson, getting on so well with the Yanks that he actually let them build multiple installations in the Australian outback, including the sweet little spot known as Pine Gap, a nice hamlet to monitor their satellites from. Who owns the satellites? Don't worry about it. But that's enough about the man. I think we've all got a pretty good idea of what he's like. Now, for the actually interesting stuff. Now, in his downtime from being the leader of a state, old Harold had something of a soft spot for the great outdoors. A rather obvious pastime considering he bounced around a country as naturally beautiful and dangerous as Australia. The thing is though, Harold was a man of culture, because he enjoyed fishing, specifically spearfishing. He also enjoyed spending a lot of time in the water doing things like snorkeling and free diving, which is rather dangerous stuff, especially in Australia. Now, you might wonder why he did free diving and not the fully kitted out diving. Well, it's because he didn't enjoy the sensation of air tanks. He found them rather unwieldy, cumbersome, and totally redundant because he's a big boy with big lungs. And credit where it's due, he did have big lungs. Apparently flexing in Parliament by holding his breath for as long as possible while sitting amongst the raucous bickering of the benches. Politics really does take the breath right out of you. After finishing up his cabinet meeting on Friday the 15th of December 1967, Harold got taken to RAAF Fairbairn to catch a flight to Melbourne and wrap up some final bits of business for the day. From there he moseyed on home to Toorak, an inner city suburb. Upon arriving home and presumably deciding that he needed time to decompress, he informed his housekeeper that he was to spend the weekend at his preferred coastal retreat in Portsea, Brisbane. Yes, really, the coastal town is called fucking Portsea. I don't know why, but that just sticks out about as much as the Gub Gub Aboriginal names. Like Bong Bong Mountain. Yes, there actually is a fucking Bong Bong Mountain. Regardless, Holt got into his red Pontiac Parisienne and moseyed on down to his quaint seaside holiday home. Along the way, meeting up with one Marjorie Gillespie, a beau he was supposedly having a cheeky little affair with, having a nice supper together before reaching the home and hitting the hay. Saturday, December the 16th. Holt arose with bright eyes and presumably very bushy-tailed and knuckled down on not fishing, instead relegating his precious fishing time on phoning his secretary and stepson. He also spent some time gardening, playing tennis, attending a cocktail party and a dinner party afterwards. Even on his off time, he still grinds on such grueling, taxing things. Truly inspirational. Sunday, December the 17th. He woke up and did his mandatory phone call to his woman, Zara, who of course just had to intrude upon his fishing time. Afterwards, he popped down to the local shops for some insect repellent, peanuts, and the weekend edition of the local rag. Then, after watching some yachts, he set out with Marjorie Gillespie, remember her, and a few others, including one, Alan Stewart. He's going to be mentioned a couple of times. On the way back to Portsea at 12:15 p.m, Holt suggested that the convoy stop at Cheviot Beach for a swim, which you'll be shocked to hear is a beach inside a place called Cheviot Bay. Upon arriving, Holt and one of his company went out for a dip in the water, because everybody else saw the absolute state of the tides and reasonably concluded that it's not fucking safe. Stewart, the only one of Holt's companions to actually go into the water, stayed in the shallows by the coast and reported the strong undercurrents trying to rip him out into deeper waters. And naturally, he got a little bit perturbed by them. Holt, on the other hand, started drifting further and further out before eventually just disappearing entirely. Not responding to shouts from the coast or indicating any sort of distress to the shore party. Not even waving his arms around or shouting for help before being subsumed by the deep blue. Stewart saw this and he rightfully concluded that Holt was bound to get himself killed, assuming he hadn't already done so. So he promptly scarpered to the officer cadet school that was just up the road. Now remember, this is the 60s and cell phones weren't about yet, so he had to haul arse to the nearest landline so that he could call the police. Upon arriving at the school, he found it basically empty. Due to it being almost Christmas and everybody having done the reasonable thing and fucked off home to spend the festivities in nice weather with their families. Yes, nice weather because it's the Southern Hemisphere. Regardless, Stuart managed to get a hold of some sad old Scrooge and used his phone to call the police. Naturally, due to who old Harold was and what had just happened, there was quite the mad scramble to find him, with the search beginning almost immediately after being reported, with the military being mobilised alongside emergency services to scour the beach and the surrounding ocean for his body. Because, being quite frank, nobody believed that he would survive in those waters. Because, despite being quite the active chap who was no stranger to the ocean, he was nearly 60 years old and the water was notably quite vicious. And frankly, he was never actually that great of a swimmer to begin with. Of course, due to the fact that Harold was literally the Prime Minister of Australia, this very quickly became quite the global news story, escaping the clutches of the Australian ecosystem and finding itself as the hottest of topics overseas. Their head of government just got eaten by fucking water. And, as always, the press handled the case with the adequate care and compassion it required, with this news anchor just absolutely overflowing with emotion.
It is feared that the Prime Minister has drowned. A great search is being made for Mr. Holt off Portsea, Victoria. However, no official announcement has been made as to the fate of the Prime Minister.
You know for an absolute fact that if this was to happen today, you would have the news presenter either losing their shit or including performative language like shocking or distressing. This isn't actually a dig against the Australian news coverage. I actually miss when the news was this blunt. However, it was all for naught, because come January the 5th, 1968, the search was called off, due to the weather not only being a hassle to search in, but also the fact that said weather was doubtlessly dragging Harold's body further and further out into the ocean, making it basically impossible by that point to find him. So, what happened to dear old Harold Holt, and what transpired in the aftermath? Well, for the latter, as you may expect, there was quite the political upset, due to, the sitting Prime Minister evidently seeking asylum 20,000 leagues under the fucking sea and not coming back. An election was held with a bunch of electoral bother that all came about because the Liberal Party were fucking idiots and did not prepare for their PM to just up and die at a moment's notice. The result of the Liberal Party's leadership election was one John Gorton, who did such riveting things like looking like that, as well as converting Australia to the metric system, setting up the Australian Institute of Aboriginal Studies to presumably find out why they look like that, and keeping Australia in Vietnam. A really swell character that I don't fucking care about. Even if he did get this gig from a bit of skullduggery on behalf of Davy Jones. Now, as you might expect from such a situation like Holt's, there are quite a few conspiracy theories abound as to his fate, due to there being no body ever found. So, let's go over some of the more well-known theories that sort of fall into two camps. The pro-death theories and the pro-life theories. First, there is the obvious one that is the current canon and is squarely pro-death. That he just fucking drowned. And we can't find his body due to either the tides dragging it out into the ocean, or due to his body being trapped under kelp and then eaten by all the little fishies, or it was eaten by sharks. With the saucy debate coming down to whether he got gassed out, drowned and then passed on, or if he had a heart attack mid-breaststroke and kerplunked into the gullet of all of the fishies, or if he gets smacked with a piece of driftwood that knocked him out, seriously, that actually is one of the theories, or if he was just straight up attacked and eaten by a shark. All of these explanations are apparently entirely reasonable, but also pretty fucking boring. Except for that last one. Another theory was that Holt was actually extremely depressed and committed suicide, with proponents of that theory usually citing the testimonies of a couple of government officials who briefly worked with the man and pointing to his rather turbulent administration as the source of his melancholy. This is countered by the testimony of literally everyone else. From his wife and kids to most of his cabinet to even a police report in 1968 deciding that he showed no signs whatsoever of depression. This is a politician after all. They are never depressed when they end up dead. Then there is the assassination theory, that, as you may intuit, suggests that Holt was, as a matter of fact, killed, with the usual culprits being either the northern Vietnamese or them. With the ascribed motivation being Holt's supposed intention to have Australian troops pull out of Vietnam, due to the Vietnam War, surprisingly enough, being rather unpopular with the general public, with the killing blow coming in either a poisoning that kicked in very, very conveniently while he was in the water, or a fucking nerve agent. Now we get into the pro-life theories, where the common line of thought is that Harold Holt actually faked his own death for a nebulous reason and lived on. Just kinda leaving all that shit like a loving wife, kids, and your job running an entire fucking country behind. The lesser theory is that he had himself a wily mistress who he wanted to run away with in the form of Marjorie Gillespie. Remember her? Well, apparently she was in on it. It turns out that after Stuart saw Harold going under the waves, Harold proceeded to channel his Super Trooper Navy SEAL frogman skills to stealth swim sneakily to the bay just over the water, where what awaited him was his little secret lady and a car to take him to an undisclosed location to take them out of the country. And where did they end up? Well, apparently the south of France, where they apparently proceeded to live in complete peace and quiet until the 80s when Harold decided to die of a heart attack, for real this time, and on land. Oh yeah, did I mention that they also frequently went back to Australia in secret for some fucking reason, and nobody ever even seen them? And you would think that most Australians would know what their Prime Minister looked like. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, wowzers, that is quite the nutty story. Surely that is the goofy comedic non sequitur to end off this section of the video with. Well, no, actually, it isn't. Because that manic shit is a theory that people actually fucking believe, despite there being no evidence whatsoever to support it. And somehow, it's still the less stupid pro-life theory of the two. So you know how Harold Holt was quite the anti-communist? How he strongly supported Australia bungling with Uncle Sam in the Vietnam jungle, and he headed a squarely anti-red administration? Well, guess what, Buttercup? All of that is a bunch of bung bullshit, because Harold Holt was actually a Chinese spy. According to British journalist Anthony Gray in his hit book, The Prime Minister Was a Spy, little bit on the fucking nose, that one, but after being contacted by court-martialed RAN officer Ronald Titcombe over a tantalising scoop about the late Mr. Holt, after meeting up and spending the next few months hashing out the timeline and totally cross-referencing and shit, the two gentlemen came to the agreement that the following testimony would be penned under Gray and released to the public. The story goes a little something like this. Back in 1929, when Holt was still frequenting the University of Melbourne, he approached Chinese consul General Sung Fa Chang to get some information for a paper that he was preparing. The paper was, of course, for a debate. Harold Holt, after all, was a mass debater. Through some flavour of arcane oriental spellcraft, Sung managed to get a hold of Holt's notes and was so thoroughly bedazzled by his skill that he asked to once more meet with Holt. Upon meeting Harold, he gave him £50 on behalf of a fictitious Mr. Chen who supposedly ran a small, totally independent commercial newspaper. Now, before you roll your eyes, remember that when accounting for inflation, that £50 magically becomes £2,752. But why did he give this money over? I don't fucking know, stop asking questions. But I would assume so he can try and make him some flavour of informant. But despite Holt taking this money multiple times, he apparently was not an informant. And Sung failed to get any informants. The guy was utterly snitchless. So Sung got replaced by another Chinaman in 1931 by the name of Li Hung, who was a real professional in his craft. Apparently, he wooed Holt into turning rat because, and I shit you not, he told him straight that the Kuomintang was infiltrated by adversaries and they needed fresh sources of intel, and that Holt was their only hope. Yes, really. They apparently actually told Harold Holt that he was Chang's top guy. And apparently, it actually worked. The thing is, though, as far as the Chinese were concerned, Harold was a hot piece of arse, with both the KMT and the Communists actively trying to get him to flip to their respective sides, especially when he actually got into Parliament. Fact of the matter was that Harold Holt was a true Sun Yat-sen patriot, and was for some reason rather ride or die for the plight of Chinese republicanism, regardless of its doctrinal interpretation. And, come May of 1936, Holt had completed his Commando Hitman Jason Bourne training to become a sleeper agent for China. There was discord, however, as the Chinese thought he was just too good to merely be a sleeper agent. They needed him to wake up. Wake up. Wake up. Wake up. So Holt got upgraded to active informant, copying files and dead-dropping them to his handlers throughout the interwar and Second World War, giving the Chinese United Front all of the juicy gossip it wanted about Australian domestic policy and bureaucracy that they would need to fight the Japanese. But here's the dealio. Come 1948, Holt was deactivated due to his handlers in the KMT having to cut costs and reallocate resources to the now resumed Chinese Civil War, which they of course were losing. Despite that, Harold did his patriotic duty as a Chinese man and continued giving vital information to the now communist regime, including knowledge that famed Filipinophile Douglas MacArthur was about to fucking obliterate Korea with nukes to destroy the Chinese and bring an end to the Korean War. This supposedly resulted in the Chinese and North Koreans coming to the negotiating table. All because of Harold Holt. The thing is, though, Holt was frankly too good at his job, to the point that he was advised to wind back his high espionage by the Chinese government, as they were totally concerned that the Australian spooks were going to start monitoring Harold Holt. And wouldn't you know it, just as soon as he became the Prime Minister, the Aussie spooks picked up on a transmission from Holt's codename HK Bors. Oh no, they're on to him. You can surely see where this is going. Indeed, on that fateful day in December in Cheviot Bay, Harold Holt, fearing his own liquidation at the hands of the capitalist pig dogs in the Australian intelligence community, faked his own death to escape them and relocate to his beloved China. But how did he do it? Well, it's rather obvious if you are a certified super genius like myself. At 12:15 p.m. on Sunday, the 17th of December, Harold entered the water and, utilising his mastercraft Bond acting skills, did his best stoic drowning impression to ward off the suspicions of his present company and the presumed agents monitoring him. From there, he was to sneakily swim out 800 yards southwest of his position, where he would meet two Chinese divers in scuba gear. What they would then proceed to do is grab Harold by his ankles and gently guide him downwards towards the conning tower of a submerged Type 033 Chinese submarine. From there, they successfully exfiltrated to Beijing, where Harold lived a long and happy life in secret, making it to the year 2000 at the ripe young age of 92 years old, being so sly and cunning that the Australian intelligence apparatus expunged all their data on him in shame, embarrassed by the fact that their own Prime Minister was a super spy. Now, there's a few holes in that story. Like how Harold was, surprisingly enough, not a Maoist. Nor did he seemingly have much of, if any, sympathies towards China. Or the fact that you cannot get a submarine 800 yards from the coast without it being easily spottable from the air and even the coast. Or, as a real smoking gun, Zara said that Harold didn't even like Chinese food. Myth busted. So, what's my personal take? Well, seeing as how I would rather slit my own throat with Occam's razor than actually adhere to it, here is a not super helpful diagram to give you a hint about my personal theory on the matter. Tell me your interpretation of it in the comments below, but in the meantime, allow me to wrap up this video with what I know for certain. Harold Holt disappeared, leaving his family, friends, co-workers and nation shocked, confused and bereaved. He is remembered today with a curious mixture of black comedy, tragedy and intrigue, being immortalised in, amongst other things, the Melbourne-based Harold Holt Memorial Swimming Centre. I am so fucking happy that I am not making that up. That's real. That's real. And that is fucking hilarious, even if it does look like a brutalist shit cube. As for what I actually think, I'm about 90% sure that he just simply got into difficulty, drowned, and then his body was carried out to sea. I give about 9% to him being attacked and eaten by a shark because, well, Australia. And then I give about 1% to the other theories, because yeah, well, possible, they're pretty fucking unlikely. But hey, that's all by the wayside in that land down under. Their prime ministers have one of the most difficult jobs on the planet. Tard wrangling Australians. So, it's no surprise that the occupation has an unironic kill count. Australian politicians have rightfully grown to fear three things. The voter, the ocean, and that one McDonald's in Engadine. Just before you go, I've got a live event coming up on Wednesday the 17th of September in London. We're basically doing a live panel show discussing Trump's campaign, his term, all the drama that's happened, the Epstein files, and we're going to be basically just discussing a lot of things about Trump, and it's going to be like a panel show, kind of like Have I Got News For You, but actually funny. And it's going to be me, it's going to be Lewis Schaefer, Alistair Williams, Nico DeSanto, and it's going to be taking place in London on Wednesday, the 17th of September. And you can buy tickets for it down below. These things are just an excuse for me to hang out with all of you and get very, very drunk. So, if you want to get tickets, you can buy them down below, and hopefully I'll see you there in London on Wednesday, the 17th of September.
It's Count Dankula on YouTube! Everybody just...